I noticed that when it was, I think it cut to Joe McCarthy getting his medal, and he was disgusted.
He's only a kid, like his first Champions Cup final.
Shipped 50 points at Twickenham in a final of a Champions Cup, and I'm so it's probably one of my biggest achievements. I don't know where the silver medal or the second medal is,
but you appreciate it on the day.
Up, and I'm going, flip that. That's what is breeding. But at the minute, he's disgusted, and I'm going, you've only played 8 games of professional rugby.
Joe presents House of Rugby, United Rugby Championship, together with Bank of Ireland, proud supporter of the 4 Irish provinces.
Hello and welcome back to House of Rugby. What a game this weekend, guys. La Rochelle are the 2022 Heineken Cup champions. A last minute try against Leinster. I'm just off the plane myself. Flight came in late, but look who I brought. Mr. Darren Cave is back.
It's good to be back. I'm just off the plane as well. We'll get into that later. Not at the Champions Cup final, but dealing with 2 screaming PSD Irish toddlers in Portugal, getting sunburnt all week. So I'm very, very stressed, but good to be here.
Excellent. Now we had to bring a Leinster man in, legend of the game, Mr. Victor Costello. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. Yeah, just off the train. Came in about 30 minutes, so fresh as a daisy.
I think it's the first time we've had 3 different provinces on now, so it's good now. We'll have a good little chat here, nice unbiased.
Yeah, we need a Connacht man for Nixon or woman.
We do. That's what we do. Excellent. But we get straight into the game, obviously. Anyway, Darren, do you see it coming?
Yeah, I don't. Leinster were favourites for me, but it wasn't. It was this. Everyone in hindsight was going, oh yeah, no, it wasn't that foregone conclusion. I don't think anybody thought it was, but everyone, do you know what I mean? After, so yeah, I think on the occasion in France, the French crowd, but I can't figure out am I happy or not. Part of me, and then see with the full-time whistle, there was a shot of Leo. Yeah. And he was just sitting there, and I thought, flip, and we'll get into it later, but obviously really happy for the Irish contingent in La Rochelle. I've played over in La Rochelle, unbelievable town, class place. So I was happy to see them get a star, and we might have to wait next year for Leinster to have another rattle at getting a 5th star.
What did you make of the game, Victor?
I thought it was quite predictable from afar. I thought the expectation levels were very, very high. That's always dangerous. It brings you back to my generation where, leaving somewhere like France, losing a game was normal, but also as heartbreaking. So when you see Leo in a stand, it's like, it's a tough ask to come back. And then also say to yourself, well, next year it's in Dublin, because that heaps more pressure on, because these finals aren't that easy to get to. But it's a good learning curve. But the consolation was, of course, the Munster contingent, Rog and Donnacha Ryan in La Rochelle. I thought they were fantastic. And I thought they worked from long before that kickoff. There was a lot of work done on Leinster, which I'm sure we'll get into. But for Leinster's point of view, really tough one to take, particularly with the travelling support down there, who fought through all the queues and all the airport delays and the trouble getting flights and accommodation. So, that irks some players, but dust himself off. Big game this weekend.
Yeah.
I think it's tough when, as a neutral, it's great when the games are that close and it's come down to absolutely nothing. But you do, and it was interesting hearing O'Gara in one of his interviews. I can't remember. There's so many TV channels at those games. And his first thought was for the Leinster management in particular, and he name dropped, probably went through them all and just said he was there last year. And when you've done absolutely everything, there's probably nothing Leinster could have done. They did enough to win it. Mm. But it was just really impressive from La Rochelle. I found it hard to. Leinster have scored so many tries. The group was a bit of a shambles this year.
Yeah.
But I was looking at it, I think Leinster averaged, they only played 3 of the matches. I think they averaged 10 tries a game. It was some shabby opposition.
Yeah, the Montpellier game, especially with that 70-point game. So,
but just to stop them scoring a try, it was so impressive.
Yeah. We said it before. We came on air. I think the game very much played into their hands. So I was over there early on Friday. I was there for the captain's run with Leinster and with La Rochelle. So Leinster, very serious, very robotic, very tuned in, which is fair enough. It's how you prepare for a game. But La Rochelle came out straight away, socks pulled down, big boom box onto the pitch. They were all dancing, throwing the ball around. The occasion didn't get to them. the pre-match press conference, O'Gara was asked some pretty interesting questions based on, basically just being ruled out by everyone, and he just sat there very calm, very collected, was kind of like, don't be surprised if we win tomorrow. And he also mentioned his back row. He said, I think we've got some of the best back rows in the world. I think over the ball, I think we're unstoppable. And he was kind of giving away hints of this is how we're going to attack and this is how we're going to approach this game. And then once the game started, even in the build-up beforehand, talking to Leinster fans on the streets, and they're all like, 20 points plus, 25 points plus, 30 points plus. And I'm like, for real? You don't realise this is La Rochelle and this is the Champions Cup final. We're in France. And then once the game started, the atmosphere, La Rochelle took over. And you're kind of like, there's something in the air here. There's then to keep them scoreless. No choice.
But see, home game, down the south of France, their hard turf, hard ground, 30 degrees heat. Wayne Barnes, traditionally known as a hometown referee. If you were thinking this is going to be a walkover, then you're completely naive. Now, you'd know yourself, Darren, this seeps into the team. Did it seep into the team, this level of expectation? Every dog in the street was expecting Leinster to win because they had the 2-second or 1-second ruck. They had all these expert opinions coming out of everywhere. You were saying in the captain's run, it was all very serious, but there was no plan B on the pitch. So then you look back, were you better off being relaxed? So what confidence did La Rochelle have that obviously Rog and Donegal infused into them? So, these 80-minute games happen very quickly and there's a lot of stresses. And sometimes with stresses, things give. So what gave for Leinster? And I think if you look back and to lead into it, they had an easy run in. They had Munster really emptied Toulouse with 100 minutes. Then Leinster played Toulouse and Aviva. It was a walk in the park. Leicester was a walk in the park for 20 minutes. They get down here, it isn't going to be a walk in the park. But why wasn't it a walk in the park? We all knew, slow down, Jameson Gibson Park, Tyke Furlong in the scrum. Was it going to be as easy as it was against Toulouse? People thought it would have been, and it wasn't. And, you throw in the Ronan O'Gara factor, who just sat there for 2 weeks and picked out how to beat Leinster, slow them down and get the man over the ball. And Leinster had no plan B, which then brings me back to talking about leadership. Where was the leadership? And then team selection. So hindsight's 2020, but what would they have done differently?
Yeah. And how do you find watching those games? Because you played with Leo and Rog, correct?
Yeah.
So how do you find that, watching two guys that you played with? Like when you were playing with them, was it pretty obvious? I think I actually just about played with them both. I think I played with Leo in some Rugby Wolfhounds game somewhere as he was finishing up. But, when you were playing, did you think those two guys were going to go on and be so successful coaching? Both
very hungry, both great captains, great leaders. But if you looked at the dynamic from the semis of the sound bites in the media were totally different. Rogers really coveted. Leo, I felt, was a bit nervous. So you had the out half versus the second row. The out half was leading the charge, could lead a team on a pitch, now had to lead a team from off the pitch. Leo, fantastic captain, fantastic coach, but had a great team around him and has a great team around him. And that, two different styles. Then you look at Leo, who has stayed in Leinster, captain Leinster, and you look at Rog, who's gone around the world, down to Canterbury. So when we spoke off air about how, what opportunity Rog has in the future after this win, well, he's already done New Zealand. So he's got the whole world as his oyster in terms of coaching. So as two players, hugely successful, hugely ambitious, but totally different. Different.
I find they're both quite interesting to interview or to listen to the interviews. Before and after games, coaches and players. I don't know, maybe because it wasn't that long ago, it was me regurgitating nonsense, but I find it very painful to listen to. Those guys are a little different. I think they speak pretty well. Rog in particular just comes across, and he's an interesting guy because, and I'll be interested to hear your take on this. Before I met Rog, as like a diehard Ulster fan, and because of the way he played and he was so competitive, I wasn't a big fan of him. And then I met him and I was like what an absolute gentleman. He's as nice a guy as I've ever met in rugby. And he comes across in his interviews, he answers the questions really thoughtfully and he comes across really honestly. Do you know what I mean?
Takes his time.
He really takes his time. He makes it, and it just comes across really, really honest. And I think that's something that, him as a player is working for him. Of course he has the rugby knowledge. The guy's played 140 games for Ireland at 10, but he comes across, do you know what I mean by that?
Yeah, very passionate. They spoke about the emotions. I mean, he spoke a lot about the emotion, taking the emotion out of it. But if you look at his Munster career, there was a huge amount of emotion in it, and I think one of the greatest moments of yesterday's game was, or on Saturday's game was, when Rog came down off the coach's box.
Yeah.
From Irish rugby point of view, his wife, his new French team, his coaches, and what it meant to him, you know, and straight down to Craig with BT and Draco and Lawrence Delalio. But he was just living this. This meant so much to him, but he also, as you say, respected the opposition and the pain they had to go through to get here. And then conversely, you had Leo, who was hurting. And I've been in that situation, hurting really, really badly, away from home with travelling support. But yeah, Rog believes in what he's doing, passionate about what it is, but also has gone through the pain to get there, you know, which everyone has to do, unfortunately.
I remember, like, just as the finalist was there, so I was down doing stuff with BT and I was on the touchline and I went onto the pitch, like, and the first thing I did was go up to O'Gara and Donnacha Ryan. The two of them got in the picture with me, they were smiling, thumbs up, and I was like, you could see what it meant to them. Like, it was just electric in the air. The players were crying, they were shaking, they couldn't believe it, but at the same time, they knew that there was something here. And if you look at the game itself, we get to more detail, like, in terms of how it played out. You're saying they had no plan B. The first 8 minutes, there was 4 penalties given away by La Rochelle, and Leinster were cruising, take the lead. And all of a sudden, then that Raymond Rule try comes out of nowhere. Yeah. And then, like, it's a momentary. I think Leinster didn't know what to do, and they're like, hold on a second now. We thought we were cruising here with these kicks. And then all of a sudden, like, that try was out of nothing.
It was. Well,
you know?
The problem with Wayne Barnes, and this is the pre-study you do in these games, Wayne Barnes, if he gives you 4 penalties, he's going to take them away in the second half. You know? And that's what happens. And it came, you know, there were stupid 50-50 calls that were penalties. And that's what he does. He goes in at halftime, it's like somebody speaks to him, hey, Wayne, you're doing well, but you need to even it up a little bit. You know, and, like, he's human, but that's what happened. You know, there were some stupid calls in the second half that went against Leinster compared to the first half when a lot of calls went with them.
I actually spoke to Wayne in the hotel after the game, and we had a few beers and whatnot, and I was chatting to him about it, and he was saying that, like, the fans and the noise made it very difficult. Like, I probably see it on TV, but when you're in there, those La Rochelle fans, they are tribal. It was really, like, and he just said, you just somehow have to switch yourself off and put yourself in there, and it's easier said than done, I'd say.
Yeah, and it's interesting thinking of tactics and these penalties and Wayne Barnes. And again, in one of Rod's interviews, he said, 3-6-9 doesn't win you finals. You know, and that was something that he had learned playing for Munster, that you got to go and score a try. So again, maybe that was part of this La Rochelle plan. Let's hammer the breakdown. And you know what? If we have to give away a penalty, particularly early on, to disrupt their flow, then so be it. Because if you stop their flow, you've got a chance of beating them, and they did. So I thought that was another interesting point as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, look, as I said, you look onto the game, I mean, they did look very flat. Leinster did throughout the game. You know what I mean?
Do you think sometimes when a result doesn't go, like Leinster were so close to winning that game, okay? Do you think if Leinster win that game, if something happens at the end and the try doesn't, whatever it is,
turnover,
are we having this conversation?
No, we're not really, because at the end of the day, our final is fine margins, isn't it? Really, like, and all it was a try in the last second.
Sometimes, I actually think it's worse in Leinster because of the expectation, and I think particularly within the province and the people of Leinster, the fans have an absurd level of, because they've been spoilt rotten with a phenomenal team. Like, you get my point I'm trying to make. If they win that game, are we sitting going, no plan B, team selection was wrong, or are we going, do you know what? That's the sign of the absolute best of the best. They can play pretty average, and I know they didn't, but for this conversation, say that ball as he reached is a knock on, falls out of his hand. We're not having this conversation.
I think if it was a coaching ticket, a French coaching ticket from La Rochelle, definitely Leinster win. But if you look at the old Leinster expectation in the last 2 weeks, since they beat Toulouse, it was this final is in the bag. People were travelling down to be part of the event where they won the 5th star.
Yes.
And travelling home with rose petals back to Donnybrook for a reunion or a welcome home party in Donnybrook yesterday. Now, that puts immense pressure on players, immense pressure. But it also then feeds into Rog. This is meat and drink for Rog over decades of Munster versus Leinster. I remember 2006 watching Leinster play in the semi-final where it was in Lansdowne Road, but it was Leinster-Munster. And the two captains coming out, Axel Foley, our dear friend, Reggie Cargan, you could see Leinster coming out confident, overconfident. They were told they were going to win. Munster came out, Anthony Foley, Rog, terrified to lose. And they beat Leinster by 40 points. This was the same again. This was Leinster expectations. They had the 2-second ruck. They had all of this stuff. But Rog unpicked it. Well, I was determined this is how you beat Leinster. I've been doing it for years back in my days playing, and this is how you do it. And he told the French team how to do it. He told the French public to travel to see it happening, and it unfolded in front of our eyes.
Yeah.
And, you know, again, this is me being really harsh on it, but it was 2 weeks of that build-up, negatively for Leinster, but hugely positive for La Rochelle.
It's interesting you've mentioned the Toulouse game a couple of times, and I definitely haven't seen them play back-to-back against Ulster and watched them against Munster. I definitely felt that Toulouse team weren't the Toulouse team that people thought they were. I felt they were there for the taking in Belfast. Ulster made an absolute horlicks of it. Munster did the exact same. And actually, I felt like it was their third trip to Ireland in, 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Leinster were the only Irish province that actually gave them what they deserved. They deserved it in Belfast.
Yeah.
When that big, that actually was a cheap shot, came in on Zebo, and the yellow card came out, and I thought, this is curtains.
Yeah.
And I thought, Munster, how have you done an Ulster? And then when they rolled in for Leinster, it was fairly... So it's just interesting that you mentioned that game, because I was quite adamant before and after the Toulouse game that Toulouse actually weren't great.
No, they weren't.
You know, and then it brings in the other part of what's probably the toughest part of most coaches' job, but again, that Leinster management is trying to compete in both trophies is so difficult. And there was the kicking the ball out the end of the South Africa and then rotating the teams, and hindsight's always brilliant. But it's such a tough thing to manage. It looked, I mean, again, you said it was written in the stars. You were going, they've gone to South Africa, they've got the bonus point, they're top of the, then they've come back and they've beaten Toulouse, who I do think were poor. They've then, rotated back to that South African team, beaten Munster easily, bring the big guns
Walk in the park.
and then, you know what I mean, walk their way to a double.
Yeah.
And that's why I think when you ask about Rog and Leo could see this possibly happening because he's been through it before.
Yes.
Whereas Rog has been there before, where he's been the underdog against a talented Leinster side. So it's like a history repeating itself to a certain amount. As I said, if it was a French coaching ticket at halftime, they would have expected the Leinster to run riot, and of course Wayne Barnes, they would have joined into the furore, game over.
What I thought was interesting as well is you're saying that we're, the rose petals line out, we're all expecting Leinster to win. Traditionally, it's an Irish thing, and we think that we do build our teams up too much. But it wasn't just Leinster and the Leinster fans building them up. I was running around the pitch before, and obviously talking to Sean O'Brien and O'Driscoll, and of course they were saying Leinster, but Lawrence Salalio was like, Leinster, we're going to walk this. Austin Healy, Leinster will walk this. Ugo Manya, Leinster will walk this. It wasn't just the Irish fans, the Leinster fans. Everyone was like, I don't even know why we're here. Like, it's just going to be it's just a Leinster win. Like, we're just here, we're getting paid, it's great. But you know what I mean? Does anyone want to hand Leinster the trophy now? That's how it felt. The whole atmosphere all weekend was just La Rochelle, like, you're just here in the final for the sake of being here because Leinster needed someone to play. And
we learned, didn't it? It is such a hard competition to win. Yeah. That, I was fortunate enough to get to a final, but in many ways it's one of the highlights of my Ulster career, but the lowlights as well, because we shipped about 40 or 45 points to Leinster, actually 10 years ago. And it's funny thinking back to that team, because I remember playing that Leinster team and thinking, that is one of the best club sides. That was sort of... Darcy, O'Driscoll, Sexton just coming through.
2 in a row. It was when they got 2 in a row, wasn't it?
O'Brien flying. Leo was still playing. And I remember Redzer thinking, this team, like Carnes, obviously, they'll never be a better. And then they just keep getting better and better and better and better. And every time you can't think they can't produce any more players, How was, in your career, what you played for Leinster amateur and professional, is that correct?
Just a couple of years amateur.
And what I'm quite interested about is, where do you think this, it's not even a dynasty at Leinster anymore. Yeah. It's a production line of success and stars, and we're astounded they haven't won a Champions Cup. Where for you, if you could put your finger on one thing or a couple of things, where did it start?
I think, great question. I think, and I was thinking long and hard about this for a long time.
You were waiting for that question.
So when I was asked, I played in the professional era as an amateur possibly, but I think in around our time, the Interpros were really the big thing, and then the European started, and we got to the semi-final of the European Cup in the first ever European Cup, and then you think it's going to happen every year, and of course it doesn't. I think, people talk about the Brian O'Driscoll era. When Brian O'Driscoll came into the club, Shane Horgan, Dennis Hickey, Leo Cullen, the emphasis changed as to, competing versus winning. And we end up, and what happens with teams is as they evolve, they end up getting the odd win here or there. And it kind of, you can see with Connacht sometimes. Connacht get the odd scalp, but they never really get consistency behind that. Whereas Leinster started to get consistency. So in around the time when we beat Munster with 14 men, Munster at their height, and that was an incredible victory for us. And Brian would say that was bad for us, but actually it was great for the players there on the pitch. But that kind of inconsistent but big events happened. And then the march into Europe, that 2006 when they lost to Munster in the semi-final, that was a big knock because Munster were just stopping Leinster. But then there was revenge in 2009 when in Croke Park. And that's when it really, really started. The belief, the expectation, but the performances matching the expectation, and bringing on Johnny Sexton, who's like, the competitor that he is, that wants to win. So a lot more people like Brian, where, it's not good enough just to wear the jersey. We need to win medals. We need to win cups. And Brian spoke recently about maybe going to France during that period where he wanted to win European Cups, and that might have been the road to do it. But luckily enough, he stayed, and they won it in 2009, and so on and so on, 11, 12, etc. Yeah. So that's where the dynamic changed. And then you've got people who want to be part of that from all the provinces. So around my time, it was mainly Dublin 4 schools. I'm not Dublin 4, by the way, I was born in the Wicklow Mountains. But then you had
literally of the mountains, the size of the man.
Shane Horkin then came in, obviously, from Louth, and then sort of spread around Sean O'Brien and became the 12 county army, and then success breeded success. And then sometimes, because you've got so much strength in depth and positions, players get picked out and sent to Ulster, Connacht and Munster, and then you find yourself in a final in 2022 where Tyke Furlong has to start the game even though he's injured.
Yeah. Even Lowy didn't do the captain's run. Lowy wasn't fully fit at all.
So all of these things happen when you have too many players. They leave. So it's hard to get that balance right. And in fairness to Leo, he's been brilliant at managing players.
But it is amazing when you look at Leinster, and all the Munster fans are going to be getting unbelievable hate here for gushing all over Leinster, aren't we? On social media, delete your Twitter. But I find it amazing when you look and think back and talk about the journey you're on. Even you look at Donnybrook and like the game in Dublin now in particular, all around Leinster, but in Dublin in particular, you have a bit of success, and they talk about success breeds success, and the better you get, the more sponsors want in the game, the more money comes in the game. The more money comes in the game, you can sign your Rocky Elsoms to top up. Then you're signing Michael Cheika, and then you're bringing in Joe Schmidt, and the players keep getting better and better. And then every kid growing up wants to play for Leinster, and then every parent wants their kid to. Then the money's going into the schools. Do you know what I mean? And then the next thing you've got this machine, which is what Leinster is at the minute, spitting out players everywhere. And I think at Ulster, I've said this before on this podcast, there's probably, I'd say, over 10 players that went to school somewhere in Leinster. Yeah. And they're phenomenal. They're good players, And I'm not talking about the obvious ones, the Geordie Murphys, the John Coonies. I'm talking about like the O'Connor brothers from Skerries, Dave Shanahan, Greg Jones, guys that were nowhere. Yeah, Nick Timoney got nowhere at Leinster. Now he's an Irish international. Yep. So I just find it quite interesting. But we better give Munster a wee bit of love. How much of Munster's success in that sort of era do you think spurred them on? Because there's always that... once you do it once, or once somebody does it, are they doing that? Why are we not doing that?
Well, absolutely. So the greatest nemesis to Leinster was Munster, and we were always compared to Munster. And if you're competing for Irish places, particularly in my position, it was, the desired Irish team was the Munster pack and the Leinster backline. That's the way it was. Yeah. And we as pack in Leinster wanted to kind of negate this. And it was hard because, we go out in games against, from way back to Mick Galway, Clossy, and then Axel, and then, any amount of Frankie Sheen, Bull Hayes, Paul O'Connell, Donnacha O'Callaghan. You keep going. Alan Quinlan.
Legends of the game, like.
Yeah. and you come off at the back of a scrum and you get met by this red wall. Hence I've got scars. I used to be really good looking. I've got all these scars, right? But I can name them. This is Eddie, and this is Alan Quinlan, and that's whoever else. But you wanted to be that, but you also felt the passion. So when you go and run with a ball, or someone takes the ball in, and you get hit so low and so fast by a red team that believes in themselves, but also had a great relationship with the crowd. So if you look at the Toulouse game in the Aviva, that was the Munster crowd of old, the 16th man that believed in their team. And, I remember Rog saying to us years ago when we were out of a European Cup, and say we won a 16, I think we won the Triple Crown in 2004. Rog had to leave Irish camp to go down and produce a performance for Munster, because that's what his fans demanded out of him. We didn't really have that until now with the Leinster fans. But Rog and Munster had that. We were jealous of that. And you want to see that coming back into Munster. But that's the way it was back then. We were always being judged against Munster. Munster were cruising in to beat English teams and French teams that we could never beat, until recent times. And all provinces need each other to push each other. So having Munster in a situation now when not so long ago Thomond Park has got vacant seats in a massive European Cup game is unheard of, should be unheard of. So you see a bit of it in the Aviva when Toulouse come back and everyone's singing Zombie at half time. That's
brilliant.
That's the passion, and like now, of course, that only consolation of losing the weekend was Rog and Donegal O'Callaghan. The whole of Munster effectively won that game, and rightly so, because that's coming back. That'll be sometime back in Ireland, that coaching ticket.
It is interesting how the provinces do feed off each other, and actually is very special. I noticed it sort of more towards the end of my career, how much. I think we are very blessed in Ireland with how professional rugby. You look at the state of the situation in Wales. I think we're very blessed with how professional rugby's worked. And I remember one of my last games playing at the Aviva against Leinster in a quarter final. We had to give a great show of ourselves. And one of the sort of you've gone and fantastic and you've lost. So it's a wee bit one of those ones, the ugly wee brother, which is the way it was for a lot of my career. But I remember going on my phone after. And first thing came up was one of the Welsh players was in Dubai, on holidays because it was a down week, and I thought, I think they just won a Grand Slam that year as well. And I did think it is very, very special in Ireland that we can come to the Aviva, and try and absolutely obliterate each other. And there was no games that when I was playing for Ulster we wanted to win more than the three, because they're your brothers, you want to beat them up, and then you come into camp and you're united to go and win, beat the All Blacks as it is now and win Six Nations. And I think at Ulster, we always had envy when Leinster played Munster because these games would be in the Aviva with 50, 60,000 people, and we would always be like, why in Leinster? Why did Leinster not want to beat us? Yeah. Why did Munster? Do you know what I mean? We wanted to be the team that. We didn't want to go to Thomond Park and the place be half empty because actually no one in Munster cared about beating Ulster because it wasn't a big deal. Or when we went to play Leinster, the RDS would have been full, but there wouldn't ever been talk about moving it to the Aviva. Yeah, and that would have been the chip on our shoulder that said, we want to be one of those teams. Connacht won a league pretty much over having a chip on their shoulder. In fairness to them, and as we know, it was more recently than Munster and Ulster won a league.
Of course it was. But just before we move on from this game, just go back to that. Your point on O'Gara there again. He's probably going to come back here at some stage. Well, at least we hope anyway. Touch wood. Hopefully Munster, probably more than likely Ireland. But I think, correct me if I'm wrong. No, I know our podcast listeners will give out to me if I don't get the stats right. But I think it's 2013 is when he retired. So he's coaching since 2014. In that 6-year period, straight away he won a top 14 title with Racing. Then he went off to New Zealand, 2 Super Rugby titles. Now he's over here. He's brought La Rochelle to 2 finals last year in the Champions Cup and top 14, and now won the Champions Cup already. I mean, this guy is already building an incredible CV for himself as a coach. What next for him? Like, is he going to stick around here for much longer, do you think? Or is it time will he move on to a new challenge somewhere else? Or back to Ireland, maybe?
I guess it depends on the wife and kids and where they are, fundamentally, if you want to be a coach, you've got to hit the road. Some people like Guy Noves in Toulouse years ago, and now Leo stayed home. Declan Kinney for a while before he went to London Irish. But Roger's done their tour, and been successful. And of course, going down to Canterbury as an Irish coach,
It's unheard of,
and being successful. Then coming back into La Rochelle. So I think, Roger's smart enough to bide his time. Fundamentally, most coaches end in failure. Be it the club that they're with, whatever else. So, he's got to gauge that and manage that. But I think for sure he'll come back and coach Munster, and that'll be great to see. And who he comes back to coaching with could be O'Connell, Donegal. But then he's smart enough to know the timing's right and when the right timing would be right, but also the players that they have down there, the squads they have. But certainly, it's such a joy to watch someone being successful from afar in a foreign land, speaking a foreign language, and then making it. It's an incredible success story. But I've no doubt there's more to come. But then you got to understand, coaches here have cycles. So mainly these cycles finish up in the World Cup. So where will Rog be at the end of 2023? Where will Andy Farrell be? That's to consider as well. Sometimes you can miss that boat.
I think his contract is up at the end of next season with La Rochelle. These current things. He signed a 3-year deal when we took over as the full head coach with Gibbs gone. So
I think
it's an interesting one.
The thing I have so much admiration for him, as you say, Victor, you touched on it there. It's just to go away. And to be so crystal clear, this is not a criticism of anyone who's transitioned into coaching the organic way, call it. But it is so much easier to play for Munster or Leinster or Ulster Connacht for 10 or 15 years and then retire and become the video analyst and then coach the backs or coach the scrum and then work your way up that way. Well, and again, that is not a criticism of everyone who's done it that way. Like, there's no need to go a more difficult path, but to do what he's done and go completely, like, he had never played in France. We don't know if he could speak a word of French. He went into Racing, and he was there kicking coach, and then I was chatty was
King coach and defence coach.
Yeah, which I always, defence wasn't a strength of his game, so I just thought that was a strange one. No offence, Rog. I know he's a big listener of the show, but to go and do that, and then go and, let's be honest, the Crusaders probably weren't that probably wasn't the top pay sheet on his desk. Probably not. He probably thought, let's go do that. Scott Robertson, one of the best coaches in the world, so I have a lot of respect for that. And for, it's a long journey, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's a long time before he's back in Ireland.
Yeah.
As you said, like, he could want to. I think he's a bit young in his coaching career to be cashing in Japan, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him there at some stage. I wouldn't be surprised if the French national team.
There's actually talk. There has been talk out over in France.
They'll be throwing everything at him, and then for him, the ultimate job for him was probably head coach of Ireland. So it's a bit early to jump in that, and I think you've also got to consider these coaches have got to transition through the coaching setup as well. Yeah, he could have been the Ireland kicking coach the day he retired.
Yeah. He's young as well, but you forget that as well. He's quite young. He's only in his early 40s,
You look at the likes, we've got to talk about Munster, keep the fans happy. You look at Rowntree, and like, how long has he been coaching for? But this is, I think I'm right in saying this is his first one as like, whereas Rog has kind of done it, he's moved up the ranks quite quickly. So I think, listen, it's brilliant for him. He's a lovely guy. I think in Ireland, even provincially, when we get past the partisanship, which we love to hate each other, but we don't really. I think everyone in Ireland's delighted for him, and Donnacha Ryan, first year in coaching, and whoever, I think we get a bit carried away of where's Rog going next, La Rochelle, for the foreseeable future, but the world's his oyster after that.
But you can also see someone staying, because many people have left the country, got bedded in 2 years. It takes probably 2-3 years to set up in a foreign land. Then you got to consider, well, when do we leave? When's a good time to leave with the wife and family? Get them back into school. So, there should be a contingent in the RFU that if they want the likes of O'Gara back, they got to start working on a plan, because all of a sudden, he may never come home, and lots of people have done it, but there's plenty of places for him to go apart from Ireland. Ireland could be his last coaching job. Munster could be his last coaching job. So he might want to put that off for a long time.
And as you say, I think he might say, I think the better your career is, probably the harder it is for you to coach that team and that country. And a guy like him who's had that career with Munster and Ireland, like, his reputation in Munster and Ireland can only really go down. Like, he's one of the greatest, most successful players in the history of the province and the country. There's very few players that are more popular, held in higher esteem. There's not much, do you know what I mean? You can't become.
No, basically what we're saying is, like, Joe, we just got to keep an eye on this guy over the next couple of years. Always stay in contact with him, whether you're Munster, whether you're a few, and
or
when
Ulster.
the opportunities, or Ulster, or anyone, when the opportunity, well, he could, you never know, but when the opportunity arises, okay, now it's time to bring O'Gara in, and don't let him slip through your fingers. I think that was what we're saying. But look, we'll move on anyway. We've enough waxing here about O'Gara. I know, I can't believe I'm actually saying that. But we're going to move on. We've got a few fan questions here. So first up, we've got an interesting one here. It's who featured in the very first ever European match that Leinster played in. Sorry, no, I'm not trying to make you feel old or anything.
That's fine.
But what can you remember about that occasion?
I remember it was very exciting. At the time, the Interpros were the big thing, to win the Interpros, and nobody turned up. I mean, there was like, AIL was huge, club rugby was huge, so there was 8,000-10,000 people at club rugby. At those days, we called our clubs the clubs, Mary's for me, St. Mary's. So the Interpros were a huge thing, and then this European stage arrived. And you really knew little else about these teams. There wasn't a lot of video work done or anything like that, or analysis. You just went out and played. And we had a really good team. We had a really strong side that was derived from the AAL. And we won the Interpros that year. We got as far as the semis against Cardiff in Lansdowne Road in 1995. But it was a fantastic journey. It was fantastic because it was right around the time of professionalism. So there was money coming into the game. Sky were there; they were coming into the game as well. So it was really, really exciting time. And we had a super team in Leinster. On the back, as I said, winning the pros, we then took on Europe. We didn't have that killer instinct to continue. We could have beaten Cardiff, and I think Brive won the first one. So, but we never actually went down to France. I think we played, not too sure who we played before Cardiff, but we were sticking close to home in that first year. Oh, we went to Milan actually. And Diego Dominguez was the Argentinian half for Milan. Yeah, so
Class
I had a
player.
group go run over him a few times. But he wasn't too fond of tackling.
He did the your man defensive system, didn't he?
Yeah, exactly. And I wasn't too fond of falling over. So and that was really exciting times. But if we knew the journey that was ahead, my God, like highs and lows.
We always talk about transition to professionalism. Can you tell us a bit about what that actually, what does that actually mean? Were you guys rocking up on a Tuesday and a Thursday night, and then someday, was there whispers, or were you pulled in? A few of you said there's a few quid. Can you give us a bit of detail about that transition?
Good question.
Well, first of all, schools rugby, where I came from, Blackrock, was professional way back through the 70s, 80s, and 90s, because you trained so often, right? So you trained 3 times a day, twice a day. Then you went into a club. And back in my day, actually, Johnny Bell was the first person, I think, that transitioned from school into Irish setup. Because there was an apprenticeship. Like when you finished in school, you went to 19s, college, under 21s, and then you were waiting around a couple of years. There was no real identification of players. But Johnny Bell, if I remember, was one of the first ones that went on tour in 94 to Australia as a kid. The transition to professionalism, there was a lot of talk about money coming into the game, that we were going to be allowed to play this game we love and get paid for it. There was no structures in place. Originally, it was going to be the clubs. So if you think of the strong clubs around the time, were Garryowen, Mary's, Lansdowne, Cork Con. Shannon, yeah. So they were going to get the money, they were going to be clubs, and they were going to compete in Europe. But luckily for the RFU, it was the provinces that got the club status within Europe. Now, if you think the success the provinces brought to the Irish team,
yes,
as you say, organically, whereas every other country had their Toulouse, their Cardiff and Swansea and Wales and Leicester, whatever else. But the actual provincial structure really gave a great foundation for the Irish team to perform, because it lifted the players out of the clubs, which didn't suit the clubs at all now. But from a provincial point of view, there was 4 provinces that competed in Europe all the time at a high level, which provided a platform of 60-odd players for the national team. And it took a while for the general punter to go to a Leinster game. So in my case, Friday night rugby in Donnybrook in the late 90s, you started to get a handful of people, but the main clubs hated it because it took from the AIL and the Saturdays.
No one likes change.
Yeah. But then Friday night rugby was a must-do. People coming home from work in Donnybrook would pop in. The lights were there, the floodlights, and a quality game ensued in Friday night, because it was a home game. We won most of our home games back then, so it was only on the road.
Most of the lads then just working normal jobs.
Yeah.
And then or the Leinster branch of the RFU, just there's 20, and are people just quitting their jobs? As training moved to the daytime?
It kind of merged. Around 97 it became, basically what happened, players were contracted from the RFU first. So the top players were contracted. Then it dripped into the provinces. So clubs were paying match fees, expenses, right? So that's the way it was. And then provinces started to pay salaries, but low salaries. So you were kind of part-time. If you had a job, you were part-time, but you'd get paid part-time wage. If you were contracted to Ireland, you then were full-time. What people really struggled with at that time was, if you were contracted to Ireland, you were brought out training every day. For people who had jobs, they were thinking, well, how can you train every day? They must have loads of time off. And people who weren't involved didn't have a clue what players did. They thought they just threw a ball around and had a laugh, right? And turned up Friday night. So then,
sounds about right.
Yeah. So it came around. Then the problem was, when it became fully professional, coaches then thought that you must train harder every day. So there was none of these signs where, oh, you need a rest. You need a break. There's no rest ever. You just kept on training. So you were flogged during the week, having to play a game at the weekend. So it went up into kind of an intense training. I'm going to say raw training. And then the signs kicked in kind of mid-noughties, where, if a guy was 19 stone, not saying that anyone was 19 stone or anything, but if they could actually do lighter training rather than the same as a guy who's 10 stone or 12 stone. So
I know which one of those you were in.
Exactly, you're still in them, yeah.
Even O'Gara was something like that with Skelton there yesterday. Skelton played 80 minutes. in that final. I mean, this is like the first time I've seen him up in person. He's like a small car, essentially, is what he is. Like a Nissan Micra or something, just taller. So like he said, like O'Gara said, like he have to manage his workload so carefully because of his size.
But if you look at Skelton, right, nobody thought he was going to play. If I was going to play, he was going to be for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
He wasn't going to start. He was going to come off the bench. And he starts in the last 80 minutes.
So when you look at the rugby now, Leinster and Ireland, would you relish a rattle at this now? Not just firstly the money. Is there any part of you that looks and goes, "Flip, these lads are absolutely, making an absolute killing." I'd love to have done that, and the game in terms of like a guy who had your sort of natural size, the opportunity to get, imagine you were in Blackrock now, you know what I mean, and the athleticism. And you played and played in that game, or do you look at it and think, "Oh, you're all right," like I do?
There was a time when I won the first Heineken Cup. There was a time where, we tried so hard for that, and then they won so many Heineken Cups and they won Grand Slams, and you're thinking, the expectation levels are so high. For us, winning a Heineken Cup was just the holy grail. It was like if we got close to it, it was just fantastic. The generation we had, and I'm serious, it's the same with you, Darren. The generation I had, I wouldn't change. The Rogers, the Closies, the Reggies, the Keith Woods, the Shane Barnes, I can name them all. That generation were fantastic. We transitioned into professional rugby. We really enjoyed ourselves, and we enjoyed the fans learning as they went. So the fans got used to, rugby and the odd win and the success and the fun, the heartbreak. Now the expectation, that's why you're so annoyed about that game of the weekend, because the expectation was so high, and to a certain extent, it was relevant. You could go back and say, we were always going to suffer in the scrums, our rucks was never going to be that fast. But ultimately, the expectation is so high, so the heartbreak is even higher. And, I think the pressure on individuals now to perform, the pressure to win is just constant. And the seasons, geez, is there ever an off season? I mean, 5 games in New Zealand.
Yeah, Like you still have the knockout stages, URC to come, and then straight into New Zealand, and then once that's over, you're into the season, and then Champions Cup, November internationals, small matter for World Cup coming up next year then as well.
And maintaining form.
You mentioned expectation, and it's not just the island; it's actual players. I noticed that when it was, I think it cut to Joe McCarthy getting his medal, and he was disgusted.
He's only a kid, like his first Champions Cup final.
Shipped 50 points to Twickenham in a final of a Champions Cup, and I'm so it's probably one of my biggest achievements. I don't know where the silver medal or the second medal is,
but you appreciate it at the day.
And I'm going, flip that. That's what is breeding. But at the minute, he's disgusted, and I'm going, you've only played 8 games of professional rugby.
I know. But the problem there is when it's going wrong, can they adjust? That's you had a lot of people talked about who are missing when they lost to Rochelle last time, but they've new people that are here this time that were inexperienced. So who's making calls on the pitch, who can change a game, and so on and so on. So I was at that game. It was a great game in 2012, by the way. Thanks for the entertainment.
You are welcome. You are welcome.
It was a great experience. It was a great experience. It was great.
As many people might not know. Some people know, some people won't. You're a qualified pilot. You flew with Ryanair for a while, and you have got your own flight school now down in Florida. I think this is a great question. So, playing in the back row in a tight Interpro derby against Munster, or flying a 737, which is more stressful?
Oh, well, it depends where that 737 is being flown. But if I can match them up, playing in the back row against Munster, where was it in Thoma Park today?
Just any like I said, like any of the biggest, tightest Interpro, some of the toughest games you played in.
Playing against the back row in my day, say in Thoma Park, against the back row of many back rows Munster could have provided, is like trying to land the 737 in a very dark thunderstorm in Italy in the rain. You're going to get there, but it ain't going to be easy.
Oh, that's a great way of
putting
it.
And how did that come about? Because again, we're chatting about professionalism. So you hung up the boots and said, "I'm going to be a pilot," or had you history?
Well, no history. Basically, like what you're saying. So you talk about the money they can make these days, and the players, and the success, and the careers they can make in themselves. Back in our day, transitioning into the real world, we were lucky we had amateur first. So therefore, we knew that this was going to end. We knew at some stage we're going to have to find a job. So I was always the player on the team in the aircraft, because you travel everywhere, as you know. I was the guy in the aisle because obviously I'm bigger, so I'd be always looking down the flight deck. What are those buttons doing down there? You know, and I wasn't great at maths. I know you wouldn't believe that. I wasn't great at maths or physics in school. So I was wondering, would you ever get in there? How do you get in there? So it was just a case of, you know, being intrigued, and then you start the journey of training to be a pilot. And it's a lot easier now to a certain extent, because back in the day, you know, you kind of had 20/20 vision, and you know, you had all these kind of ideas about physics and how a plane flies. And yes, you do need to know that, obviously, but it's kind of more wide open now, and there's a lot more careers and jobs available. So
it's like 100 hours or something you have to do at the start just to get you just to
250 hours.
250 hours.
Yeah. So you start off in the light aircraft.
Really?
Yeah.
That's a lot. It's like in the sky.
So
it's not easy. You know?
It's not easy at all,
It's not easy.
but it's equally rewarding. So
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
it's like that question. It's equally rewarding. You're landing aircraft while everyone else is in bed. You know, like your half your day is finished on earlies when people are going to work. You know, so
You love getting the clap when the plane lands?
you don't hear the clap because the door's
Anymore,
closed.
yeah.
But you ain't gonna hear it. What's the point of the clap? Note to everyone at
Listen,
home.
sometimes I clap myself when I land. I tell you that much, you know.
And a flight school in Florida. That's like to one of our random millions of listeners. That's quite a random piece of information. Can you tell us
Yeah.
just anything about how that came about?
Well, basically, when you're a pilot, I was 8 years in an airline, and you're asked all the time how to become a pilot. So we decided to plan a route for people. So Florida, because of the blue skies, is a lot of people train in Florida. So we opened an Irish flight school in Florida. So we've got 2 runways down there, 2 offices open. So yeah, we're basically a European flight school in Florida to train European pilots that may not have the weather over here. But as I said, fully Irish owned, so very proud of that. You know.
That's brilliant. Not bad. Yeah, I'd say like Florida now, I'd say the weather ain't too bad down there. I'd say it's definitely better than what we're getting over here.
It is. It'd be a bit like Marseille. It's getting pretty hot, you know.
Yeah.
But as I said, it's the blue skies that's attractive, so people can get, you know, qualified quickly.
That's something as I mean we forget about mentioning yesterday. Like when I was over there in terms of the heat, like the Saturday wasn't as bad as the Friday. It wasn't as humid, but it was like 29, 30 degrees. Leinster aren't used to that. No. Rochelle are. You know, playing 80 minutes in a final when it's 30 degrees, dead humid, like no clouds in the sky whatsoever. That definitely played into that La Rochelle's hands, right?
Makes a big difference. I always thought when I was playing, like when you're signing players, I was like, sign Kiwis because they can handle the weather. Don't sign Aussies. South Africans are okay because they're absolutely enormous.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But don't be like just sign because like they're brought up playing in the not the knee-deep mud, but the piss and rain. So yeah, it definitely didn't work for Leinster those conditions.
We were actually ahead of our time one time in '96. We prior to 5 nations at the time, we went warm weather training in Atlanta, Georgia. Yeah, it was great. It snowed the whole week. First time ever snow in Georgia.
That's such an Irish story.
It's just what to say. It's a real Irish thing.
That was the Irish team as well. Yeah.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Another interesting fact, Victor. We've got it's full of these mad facts. You are a 5 times Irish shot put champion, and you competed in the 1992 Barcelona Olympics. Where are the Olympic rings?
The ring rings, yeah. Well, I got freckles, so I didn't need to get any tattoos. You know, I've got enough freckles, so tattoo wouldn't work. Yeah, no, athletics versus rugby, shot putting. It isn't that glamorous. I was reasonably good at it, but at the time, as we spoke earlier, I was coming up the ranks in rugby, and athletics wasn't really funded that well. Fantastic people in it, really great people involved in the structure, but the funding wasn't there. So if you look at what we were doing at schools rugby, Darren, back in the day, under 21s, it was just hotels, resources, the whole lot, whereas athletics is really, it's a selfish sport. You know, you've got to be on your own, and I much prefer the team sports. I was lucky that when I was growing up in athletics, as a player, there wasn't much happening in the early 20s, as I spoke about the Johnny Bell effect. So I had time to go and continue the shot putting, but I was never going to continue. Being involved in a team sport was so much more rewarding. If you went out and threw a shot put and you won, it was great. If you lost, you're on yourself to blame. If you let someone down in a tackle, you've got 14 people you've let down, you know. But then conversely to that, when you win together. So I was lucky I was involved in the team sport and a lonely sport of sorts, and I chose the team sports. But shot putting was really good to me. It wasn't great to me from a rugby point of view because your fast twitch muscles make you great over 10 yards, not so great over 3K, you know.
I remember when
or 80 minutes.
when Ulster signed Tom Court. I remember Tom Quirty was an Australian shot putter,
yeah.
and like, by God, he was powerful, but he could not move.
Yeah.
It was like, in the shot put, you're in the wee, like,
Yeah.
I don't know how big, say 2 meter circle.
Yeah.
That was like, what I mean, that's the rugby. You've got that power output, but it's in
I
that
know.
vicinity.
I used to say to people, what was the warm up for the shot put? And I said 2 laps of the circle.
Yeah.
Right, so before we finish up, I know we touched on it last week on the show, so our listeners will have seen us gone through that in detail, but we took a quick look at the quarterfinals of the URC coming up. So first up, Leinster Glasgow at home. I don't want to mince my words out again or chew them again based on what happened the weekend, but is that a foregone conclusion?
Do you know what? Listening to Leo Cullen this morning asking the supporters to turn up is not where you want to be, Like, I don't know whether he thinks the supporters are fickle, but what he was asking them to turn up in the RDS, it depends on their selection. I mean, yes, I'd like to think to be a level under that team that performed last weekend, they'll be ready to take on Glasgow at home, absolutely.
Yeah, I'd agree. In Glasgow, famous last words now. This is the problem with these things. I haven't been that impressed with Glasgow. They finished in 8th. They're not in Europe next year. Yep. They weren't great against Edinburgh. It's rugby, so anything can happen, but I would be very surprised to see anything other than a Leinster win there.
Definitely. What about the big one? The big one up north.
Oh my goodness.
Ulster and Munster. I mean,
it's a foregone conclusion. Home win, isn't it?
Listen to this here.
Oh, God. Now, listen, you go first, Victor.
Well, do you know what I mean? I don't know, what are the crowd supports like up there? I mean, Munster, I just think Munster are on a decline till Van Graham leaves. It's very hard to play for a coach who's out the door or a coaching ticket.
He's already in bat.
Yeah. I mean, he's gone. And, such quality players in Munster that if they were being driven right, and I just think they're kind of on a slope at the moment. They need next season to start as soon as possible. So I would probably go for a home win.
I have to go for a home win. I'm not coming on any show and saying that Munster are going to win in Belfast. I know they did a couple of weeks ago. Listen, I am backing Ulster. I just think like they hit that slump. I thought Munster really deserved to beat them in Belfast was say a month ago, whatever it was. I just don't think Ulster will play that badly again. No. I think they've got more in them. I'm going Ulster when I have to, same as you.
Yeah. No, honest to God, I can't believe I'm saying this. Oh, you fancy Ulster? To be honest with you, I think, I know Munster have beaten them twice this season, but that game against Leinster, that game against Toulouse took a lot out of Munster. They're on the decline. I said it on the show last week. I personally think Van Graham's brain's already in bat. He's already thinking ahead of next season. I think Ulster are starting to come back into form again. They've got a lot of their players back. There's no messing around with the likes of Lowry in a 10. You know what I mean? Like, they're ready to go. They're going to have a full house in the Kingspan.
That's the key one. I think people have a huge do not realise how important Billy Burns is to Ulster, but because Michael Lowry's not a fly half at that level. So when he goes, it's not like Leinster where you just chuck Ross Byrne or Harry Byrne if you're really stuck, or somebody else if you're absolutely fudged.
Frawley, they've got plenty there. Like, you know what I mean? Frawley's not a superstar.
I think when he plays, he doesn't get a lot of credit. Because the way he plays, he's not spectacular. But if you look at the backs around him and how he brings players into the game, so I think that'll make a big difference. And I'm hoping, and I'm going for Ulster.
Yeah. Stormers versus Edinburgh. Stormers have had an incredible second half of the season. They finished second in the table. I think a lot of people are saying that they could be the team that could possibly beat. We're saying Leinster now, but maybe Ulster, but they're the strongest South African team. I mean, I'd fancy a home win there for the Stormers, especially the fact that it's in South Africa.
Do you think if they win, they would beat Glasgow in the next round, do you?
To be honest.
What do you think? In fact, have you seen much of let's be honest, it's hard to catch all the rugby.
It is.
There's a lot on. There's a lot of ruggers on.
Well, I go for another home win there for sure. The South Africans coming into URC took a while to get going, and now they're hitting form, and as usual, hitting form at the bloody right time,
Yeah.
I agree with that one.
Yeah, definitely. The final one's the tricky one. It's the Bulls and the Sharks. So the Bulls are at home, but I think the Sharks have got the likes of Sia Khaleesi and whatnot, and Pippi, and they've got some really, really big names in that team.
Listen, it's really hard to know, isn't it? Like we've of all the games, where we're going through with a fine comb, it's probably not the South African derbies, so we don't know. I would probably just have to go home win. I think I do know from playing over there's a bit of altitude in the Bulls. I know they're particularly formidable at home. albeit. And I suppose the Sharks in Belfast, the last time I've seen them play and watched them closely, they finished really strongly, but as a whole, I wasn't that impressed with them. So again, it's like, who knows? And either team that wins that game is going to be a force to be reckoned with this competition, but home win again.
So it doesn't really matter anyway who wins the quarterfinals and who wins the semi-finals, because Leinster are going to win it anyway, sure. That's a foregone conclusion.
Let's build that narrative. Munster beat Ulster this week, Leinster.
Leinster have already got it won, you know. So that's it. But look, guys, unfortunately, that's all we've got time for. Victor, I hope you enjoyed coming on.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Pity about the result, but Darren, stick a looking at me to say, Joe.
It's good to
Keep coming back.
Here. That was Victor was a great guest, wasn't he? He's very interesting and listening to our nonsense here and just something a little bit different and a proper Olympian, not like the Love Island Olympian, Greg O'Shea. So
we love you too, Greg. We love you too, Greg. And thanks again to our partners, Bank of Ireland, proud supporters of the 4 Irish provinces.
Joe presents House of Rugby, United Rugby Championship, together with Bank of Ireland, proud supporter of the 4 Irish provinces.